Now we're still looking at unprecedented sedimentary activity, which is point 4. We're going to look at unprecedented sedimentary activity points to the worldwide flood. We're still looking at that. Let's keep looking. And we're going to get to the next point, which is point 5. Paleontology. How many heard about paleontology? Most of them don't know a paleo from an ontology. Critics maintain that the rise and fall of waters of the Mosaic deluge, the Noahic Flood, about which Moses wrote in Genesis, of course, are described to have been gradual and of short duration, and that they would have produced comparatively little change on the surface of the country they overflowed. That the flood period was a tranquil one, they're saying. However, today, when the continents and oceans are in a state of equilibrium, there are tremendous oceanic currents still. One of these, the South Equatorial Current, carries 6 million tons of water every second northward across the equator. But how much more powerful must the currents have been when the oceanic waters impelled onward by the breaking up of the fountains of the great deep and suddenly swollen by the opening of the windows of heaven, rose above the highest mountains of the earth within a period of 40 days? That's unbelievable. And then after 5 months began to return from off the earth continually. And that was tranquil, really. Nelson clearly indicates the impossibility of the tranquil theory. As the sea began to rise, each twice daily current could come higher and higher up the rivers and the valleys, spreading farther and wider inland each time, and would then recede. Violence! Can you imagine living on that earth like that way? No wonder Noah stayed into the ark for a while. In places, doubtless, the incoming movements would be as fierce and as violent as in the Bay of St. Michael or the mouth of the Amazon, and even more so. The directions of the tidal currents and their violence would change with the changing contours of the surfaces being encroached upon. Moment to moment, they would change dramatically, maybe. We do not say that the flood was brought on by the gradual rising of the sea bottoms, though it may well have been, but that being the gentlest manner in which a universal deluge could be brought about, shall we, in view of what we know of tides, say there could be a universal flood and no violence be done on the earth? Impossible. Can we think it possible? There were no currents, no movements, no motions of the waters back and forth and hither and yon? Really? Nelson goes on, even the relatively small amounts of water involved in river floods have caused damage that staggers the imagination. Bridges, houses, immense boulders, and trees are torn up and swept along as mere pebbles and matchsticks. Such floods seldom attain a depth of more than a few dozen feet, and their main force is expended within a few days or hours. But when we begin to speak in terms of a flood that grew mightily upon the earth, and prevailed upon the earth 150 days, and covered all the high mountains which are under all the heavens, Genesis 7:18, 19, 24, we must face the fact that we are no longer dealing with the phenomena that are familiar to modern science. We can take a look at the small little projections we have here and there, and then when the immense, complete surface of the earth is involved, unimaginably higher speeds of ocean waves coming at each other, smashing into each other with such violence, things not going up feet but miles. It therefore cannot be denied that a universal flood must of absolute necessity have accomplished a vast amount of geologic work in a relatively short period of time. Erosion and sedimentation must have taken place on a gigantic scale. Even the word gigantic isn't gigantic enough. Previous isostatic adjustments of whatever sort they were must have been entirely unbalanced by the great complex of hydrostatic and hydrodynamic forces unleashed in the flood waters. Isostatic. What does isostatic mean? Isostatic. Subject to equal pressure from every side, being in hydrostatic equilibrium as a body submerged in liquid at rest. Okay. Interesting, right? I got a dictionary here. So, we must face the fact that we are no longer dealing with the phenomena that are familiar to modern science. It therefore cannot be denied that a universal flood must of absolute necessity have accomplished a vast amount of geologic work in a relatively short period. Erosion and sedimentation must have taken place on a gigantic scale. Previous isostatic adjustments of whatever sort they were must have been entirely unbalanced by the great complex of hydrostatic and hydrodynamic forces unleashed in the flood waters, resulting very likely in great telluric terrestrial movements. Probably moment after moment after moment, the surface of the earth changed dramatically worldwide. Associated with the volcanic phenomena and the great rains must also have been tremendous tidal effects, windstorms, and a great complexity of currents, cross-currents, whirlpools, and other hydraulic phenomena. After the floodgates were restrained and the fountains of the great deep stopped, there must still, for a long time, have been much more geologic work accomplished as the masses of water were settling into new basins and the earth was adjusting itself to new physiographic and hydraulic balances. Loophole insists that note should be taken of the tremendous geological possibilities that lie behind the breaking open of the fountains of the great deep. The vastness of these eruptions must be in proportions to the actual depth of the flood, miles deep. And he adds further with regard to the significance of Genesis 7:18-20 for modern science. What opportunity for working vast geologic changes lie dormant in these mighty waters? The native force of Gabhar is enhanced by one midudith exceedingly in verse 18, and by the doubling of the same adverb, a Hebrew superlative, in verse 19, 7:18-20. Let me just take a look. Genesis 17, 18-20. Oops, let me just double check that. Genesis 7, 18-20. Sorry. One letter, okay. The water prevailed. Then the flood came upon the earth for 40 days, and the water increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. The water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. The water prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered. The water prevailed 15 cubits higher, and the mountains were covered. All flesh that moved on the earth perished, water, birds, cattle, beasts, and so on. Just think of the immensity of that. Just remember, I just went and did some research, ran into some people that really seemed to write where I could understand what they were saying. And this is just a small amount of some of these authors' works. But now we must consider the all-important question of the sequence of deposition of these stratified beds. This supposed order has been made the basis of the accepted system of geochronology and historical geology. What is a stratified bed? Let's take a look. Dictionary. Stratified. Having its substance arranged in strata or layers as stratified rock or layers of rock. Okay, see? I have a dictionary, so I don't have to be a geologist. This supposed order has been made the basis of the accepted system of geochronology and historical geology. It is the backbone of the theory of organic evolution, with its purported display of gradual development of all forms of creatures from simple beginnings through the various geological ages as supposedly shown in the fossils contained in the sedimentary rocks. Of course, begs the question, how old are the rocks that contain the fossils? And the answer, they're as old as the fossils in the rocks. Well, how old are the fossils in the rocks? As old as the rocks. How old are the rocks? As old as the fossils. Sound kind of peculiar to you? It's kind of circular reasoning. And they actually write whole textbooks on that basis. Thus, the very plainest testimony to the great event in which the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished, has been transformed instead into a supposed rock record of gradual organic evolution, not revolution. We have already noted, however, at some length that this record proves extremely fragmentary and contradictory upon closer examination. It has been shown that the supposed divisions between the various systems are more often than not non-existent. We have pointed out that anything approaching the complete geologic column is never found in any one place on the Earth's surface, and if some of it is supported, the rest of it is against, contradicted. But only one or very few systems at most. See? Even those that are found at a given locality quite commonly have one or more important systems missing. Now that's nothing, or is it something? Well, yeah, I read about, we probably bump into that, the evolutionary order of a certain rock strata going on for 100 some odd miles, and the next one below it, just that much below it, like a thin line, measurable, amazing. Problem, the one on top should have been the one on the bottom. Solution, oh, it was just lifted up for hundreds of miles, and then just gently, that one left down, and this one just touched it, just like this, right? Just hardly any space between the two arms of rocks. No rock debris, nothing. No, uplifting is a hugely violent thing just in a small couple of dozen feet. Never mind a couple of 100 miles. Not even a little bit of rubble. Now, how does a geology student live with that? I don't know. So, even those that are found at a given locality quite commonly have one or more important systems missing as compared, as I just mentioned, with the supposed standard column. Often, without any physiographic evidence, like I said, where's the debris, that the supposed intervening period of erosion or non-deposition ever really occurred, or uplifting. And it is not at all unusual for strata to be found completely out of the approved order, with the old strata missing conformably on top of young strata. This says it was reversed. And all of this, as we have repeatedly emphasized, bears extremely hard on the theory of uniformity and the geologic ages. But it is just what one would expect in the light of the biblical record. In some areas, there would be deposited one assemblage of sediments, gently by water, just right. In other areas, and it could be huge because it just falls down when the water is still. In other areas, entirely different assemblages, depending on the source areas and directions of the deposition current. Current of water going like this, all the way down, drops it down. Thus, in the tremendous complex of flows and waves and sediments, where there are entrapped organisms, a variety of different types of sedimentary rocks would even be laid down directly on the crystalline basement. Again, quoting Dr. Speaker of Ohio State. Further, how many geologists have pondered the fact that lying on the crystalline basement are found one place to place not merely Cambrian, but rocks of all ages?